The great hall of Axiom Prime stretched upward like a frozen waterfall made of crystal. Light from a dying blue star poured through the transparent walls and broke into 1,000 colors across the floor. 11 thrones rose in a half circle at the center of the chamber, and upon each throne sat a being older than human civilization itself. Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood alone in the middle of that vast space. She was a small woman with gray streaks in her dark hair and lines around her eyes that spoke of too many difficult years. Behind her, floating screens showed the faces of 12 billion humans watching from Earth and its colonies. They had been members of the Galactic Conclave for only 60 years. In the eyes of the elder species, they were still infants taking their first steps among the stars. The Valori first speaker rose from his throne. He was tall and thin, with a hard shell covering his body like armor made of black glass. His many eyes reflected no warmth, no mercy. He had lived for over 800 years, and he had seen many young species rise and fall. Humans, he believed, would be no different. The charges against the species known as humanity are as follows, he said. His voice buzzed like 1,000 insects speaking at once. Genetic instability, cultural contamination, ideological incompatibility, and most seriously, existential threat to galactic harmony. Elena listened without moving. She had known this moment was coming. The Conclave had watched humanity with growing fear for decades. Humans changed too fast. They asked too many questions. They refused to accept that some problems had no solutions and some boundaries should never be crossed. The first speaker continued reading from the judgment. Elena heard the words but did not truly listen. She was thinking about her daughter back on Earth, about her elderly mother in the colony on Mars, about the billions of ordinary people who had done nothing wrong except be born human. The sentence is as follows, the first speaker announced. The hall fell completely silent. The species known as humanity is to be erased. A gasp rose from the watching screens. Elena felt her heart grow cold, but she did not let her face show any fear. All human colonies will be dismantled. All human technology will be confiscated. All records of human history, culture, and scientific achievement will be purged from galactic databases. The surviving population will be transported to the planet designated Kepler-4 42b, located beyond the outer boundary of mapped space. One of the other judges, a creature made of flowing silver liquid, spoke up. The survivors will be provided with 90 days of basic nutrition supplies. No tools, no ships, no fabrication equipment, no written materials of any kind. Additionally, the first speaker added, selective memory alteration will be applied to remove all knowledge of advanced technology and scientific principles. Elena finally spoke. Her voice was calm and clear. You intend to take everything from us. Our homes, our history, even our memories. We intend to remove a threat, the first speaker replied. Your species develops too rapidly. You destabilize everything you touch. In 60 years, you have already begun to upset trade balances, question established laws, and spread dangerous ideas among younger species. If left unchecked, you would tear apart the order we have maintained for 40,000 years. And if we refuse? The first speaker's many eyes flickered with something that might have been amusement. You have no ships capable of resisting our fleet. Your weapons are toys compared to ours. You have no allies willing to speak for you. Refusal is not an option. Elena looked around the great hall at the 11 judges who had decided the fate of her entire species. The Valori with their hard shells and cold logic. The mech weavers with their bodies of living metal. The dreaming ones who existed half in this reality and half in another. All of them ancient. All of them powerful. All of them afraid. She smiled. The expression seemed to disturb the first speaker. His armored body shifted uneasily on his throne. "You find something amusing about your extinction?" "Not extinction," Elena said softly. "Exile. There's a difference. And yes, I do find something amusing. You have studied us for 60 years. You have read our histories, analyzed our cultures, observed our behaviors. And after all that, you still do not understand us at all. We understand enough. We understand that you are dangerous. Dangerous, yes, but not in the way you think." Elena straightened her shoulders and looked directly into the first speaker's many eyes. "You see our rapid change as a flaw. You see our questions as threats. You see our refusal to accept limits as a disease that must be cured. But those are not weaknesses. They are our greatest strengths. Strengths that will do you no good on a barren world at the edge of nowhere. Perhaps." Elena's smile did not fade. "But you should know something about humans, first speaker. We have been knocked down before. We have faced extinction before. Ice ages, plagues, wars, disasters that should have ended us 100 times over. And every single time, we got back up. Every single time, we rebuilt. Every single time, we came back stronger than before." The first speaker made a sound that might have been laughter. "You will have nothing. No tools, no knowledge, no hope. We will have each other," Elena replied. "And that has always been enough." The judgment was executed within a single standard month. Human colonies were emptied. Ships were confiscated. Cities were dismantled. The great libraries of Earth were burned, their contents erased from every database in known space. 12 billion people were loaded onto transport ships and carried across the galaxy to a small, hostile world orbiting a dim red star. The conclave was thorough. They removed every trace of human achievement from the galactic record. Within a year, it was as if humanity had never existed at all. Young species who asked about the empty sectors where human colonies had stood were told that nothing had ever been there. The name Earth became a word without meaning. On the last transport ship, Elena Vasquez stood at a viewing window and watched the stars blur past. Around her, families huddled together in fear. Children cried for homes they would never see again. Old people stared at nothing, their memories already growing hazy from the neural treatments. But Elena did not cry. She did not despair. She looked out at the darkness between stars and made a silent promise. The conclave believed they had solved the human problem. They believed that exile and erasure would be the end of the story. They were wrong. This was not an ending. It was a beginning. And one day, the galaxy would learn what happened when you tried to break something that refused to stay broken. Elena touched the cold glass of the window and whispered words that no one else could hear. "We will remember, and we will return." The transport ships descended through clouds, the color of rust and blood. When the doors opened, 12 billion humans stepped out onto a world that seemed determined to kill them. They called it Cinder. The air was thin and tasted like metal. The sky never turned blue, only shifted between shades of orange and brown as the dim red sun crawled across it. The soil was poisoned with heavy metals that made most earth plants wither and die within days. Storms swept across the barren plains with winds strong enough to knock a grown man off his feet. And the cold never truly went away, even in what passed for summer on this broken world. The conclave ships left 90 days of nutrition paste and basic clothing. Then they rose back into the sky and vanished, leaving humanity alone at the edge of nowhere. Commander Marcus Chun had been the captain of Earth's diplomatic fleet before the exile. Now he stood on an alien hillside and looked out at millions of confused, frightened people with nothing but the clothes on their backs. The neural treatments had stolen much of their technical knowledge. Engineers could not remember how to build engines. Doctors had forgotten the names of medicines. Scientists stared at the sky and could not recall. The equations that had once let humanity touch the stars. But Marcus remembered how to lead. And that would have to be enough. "We need shelter," he announced to the crowd gathered around him. "We need water. We need food. Everything else can wait." The first year was the worst. People died by the thousands. The nutrition paste ran out after 3 months, and the native plants were mostly toxic. The water from the rivers caused sickness until they learned to boil it with fires made from the strange, woody growths that passed for trees on cinder. The thin air left everyone exhausted after even small amounts of work. Children and elderly people were the first to fall. Mass graves stretched across the plains near the landing sites. There was no wood for coffins and no time for proper ceremonies. The living could only dig holes in the poisoned soil and say quick prayers before moving on to the next crisis. Some people gave up. They walked out into the storms and never came back. Others turned on each other, fighting over scraps of food or patches of ground that seemed slightly less deadly than the rest. For a while, it seemed like the conclave had been right. Humanity would tear itself apart and fade away, just another failed species forgotten by the galaxy. But then something changed. It started with small things. A woman named Dr. Amara Okonkwo, who had been a geneticist before the memory wipes, began scratching symbols on cave walls. She could not remember the details of her old work, but something deep in her mind still understood patterns. She studied the native plants, testing them on herself when no one else would volunteer, slowly mapping which ones were poison and which ones might be food. An engineer named Yusuf Rahman built the first forge. He could not remember the complex metallurgy he had once known, but his hands still understood the basic principles. He found rocks that contained iron and copper. He built a furnace from volcanic stone. The first tools were crude and ugly, but they worked. Teachers gathered children around fires at night and told them stories. They could not remember the exact dates or names from human history, but they remembered the spirit of it. They told tales of people who had survived impossible odds. They spoke of ancestors who had crossed oceans in wooden boats, who had walked through deserts, who had endured famines and plagues and wars. They made sure the children understood one simple truth. Humans had faced darkness before and found their way back to the light. By the end of the first decade, scattered settlements had begun to stabilize. The population had fallen from 12 billion to less than 500 million. The losses were staggering, but the survivors had learned how to live on cinder. They knew which plants to eat and which to avoid. They had developed basic agriculture using modified native species. They had shelters that could withstand the storms and tools that could work the hostile soil. Commander Marcus Chun died in the 15th year. A lung disease caused by years of breathing the thin metallic air finally took him. But before he died, he gathered the leaders of all the major settlements and made them swear an oath. "Remember who we are," he said, his voice weak but his eyes still burning with determination. "Remember what was taken from us, and never, ever give up." Dr. Amara Okonkwo became the next leader. Under her guidance, the settlements began to work together instead of competing. She established a council where representatives from each community could share knowledge and solve problems together. She started schools where children learned not just survival skills, but also the stories and values of their lost civilization. The conclave sent monitoring drones every 10 years to check on their exiled prisoners. The drones always found what they expected to see: primitive settlements, simple tools, a dying species slowly fading away. The watchers in their crystal towers felt satisfied that the human threat had been contained. They never looked beneath the surface. By the 50th year, the population had stabilized at 2 million. The surface settlements remained deliberately primitive, carefully maintained to fool the watching drones. But deep beneath the mountains, in caves that the Conclave sensors could not penetrate, something else was growing. The elders gathered the young around fires every night and told them the truth. They spoke of Earth and its blue skies. They described the colonies that had stretched across dozens of worlds. They explained how the Conclave had feared humanity's potential and tried to snuff it out, and they made the children promise to remember, to learn to grow stronger. They took our past, the elders would say, but they cannot take our future. That belongs to us alone. The children listened with wide eyes full of anger and hope. They were the first generation born on Cinder, raised on stories of a home they had never seen. They did not know what the stars looked like from Earth. They did not know the feeling of breathing air that did not burn their lungs, but they knew who they were. They knew what had been stolen, and they knew, with a certainty that burned in their hearts like fire, that one day humanity would rise again. The long dark had tested them. It had taken everything they had and demanded more. It had killed billions and broken countless spirits, but it had not destroyed them. From the ashes of 12 billion exiles, 2 million survivors had forged something new, something harder, something that would not break no matter how much pressure the universe applied. They were still human, and that meant they were just getting started. Every 10 years, the silver drone descended from the orange sky. It floated over the scattered villages, scanning the primitive huts and simple farms below. It recorded humans dressed in rough clothing, working the toxic soil with basic iron tools. It noted the small population, the high death rates, the complete absence of any advanced technology. Then it rose back into the clouds and transmitted its report to the Conclave. The human threat remained contained. The exiles were slowly dying as expected. No intervention was required. The drone never thought to scan beneath the mountains. Its programming assumed that a primitive species would have no reason to dig deep into the rock. This assumption, like so many others the Conclave had made about humanity, was completely wrong. Director Kenji Vasquez Chen stood in the heart of New Geneva and smiled as he watched the drone's signal fade from the monitoring screens. He was the grandson of Elena Vasquez and Marcus Chen, born in a cave 30 years after the exile. He had never seen Earth. He had never breathed air that did not require filtering. But he carried the memories of his grandparents in his heart, and he carried their mission in his soul. Around him, the underground city hummed with activity. Tunnels stretched for kilometers in every direction, carved from the mountain rock over decades of patient work. Geothermal vents provided heat and power. Hydroponic farms grew food in artificial light. Workshops produced tools and machines that would have amazed the Conclave engineers who believed they had reduced humanity to the Stone Age. The secret had been kept for over 100 years. Every adult on Cinder knew about New Geneva and the other hidden cities beneath the surface. Every child was taught from birth to maintain the illusion above ground, to play the role of primitive survivors whenever the drones came to watch. It was a game they all understood, a performance they had rehearsed for generations. But the truth was something else entirely. In the Academy of Reconstruction, scientists worked to rebuild human knowledge from first principles. The neural treatments had stolen their memories of advanced technology, but they could not steal the fundamental human drive to understand. Researchers studied physics by dropping rocks and measuring their fall. They learned chemistry by mixing substances and recording results. They developed mathematics by solving problems that their daily survival required. It was slow work. Knowledge that had taken humanity thousands of years to accumulate had to be rediscovered piece by piece. But humans had one advantage the Conclave had not considered. They knew it was possible. They knew that their ancestors had built starships and quantum computers and fusion reactors. They knew these things could be done because they had been done before. And this time, freed from the influence of galactic standard technology, They found new paths. Dr. Yuki Okonkwo Raman was the granddaughter of Amara Okonkwo and Yusuf Raman. She led the physics division of the academy, and she had spent her entire adult life working on a single problem: how to travel faster than light. The conclave used fold drives, technology that bent space around a ship and allowed it to skip from point to point across the galaxy. Every spacefaring species used some version of this same basic principle. It was considered the only way to beat the light speed barrier. Yuki disagreed. She had found hints in the old stories, fragments of theories that her grandmother had scratched on cave walls decades ago. There were other ways to manipulate space and time, other mathematical frameworks that the conclave had dismissed as impossible or impractical. The elder species had stopped innovating so long ago that they had forgotten how much they did not know. In her laboratory deep beneath the mountains, Yuki built her first working prototype in the year 157. It was ugly, a tangle of wires and crystals and magnetic coils that barely fit in a small room. But when she activated it, a small metal ball vanished from one side of the chamber and appeared on the other, without passing through the space between. She had created a slip drive. It worked on principles completely different from conclave technology. It left no energy signature that their sensors could detect. And it was just the beginning. By year 200, humanity had caught up to galactic standard in most areas and exceeded it in several. Their slip drives were faster and more efficient than conclave fold drives. Their computing systems used quantum principles that the mech weavers had declared mathematically impossible. Their medicine had advanced beyond anything the elder species possessed. The rector, Kenji, called a meeting of the Council of New Geneva. Representatives from all the hidden cities gathered in the great chamber carved beneath the tallest mountain on Cinder. The question before him was simple, but carried the weight of centuries. What do we do now? Some argued for revenge. Their ancestors had been torn from their homes, stripped of their memories, and left to die on a poisoned world. Millions had perished in the long dark. Justice demanded that the conclave pay for what they had done. Others urged caution. Humanity had rebuilt itself in secret, but they were still vastly outnumbered. The conclave controlled thousands of worlds and had fleets that darkened the skies of entire systems. A direct confrontation would be suicide, no matter how advanced human technology had become. Kenji listened to both sides for hours. Then he stood and spoke. Revenge would feel good, he admitted. I understand the anger. I carry it myself. But our ancestors did not survive the long dark so that we could throw away everything they built on a war we might not win. He gestured to the walls of the chamber, where carved images depicted the history of humanity on Cinder. The exile, the death, the rebuilding, the hidden renaissance beneath the mountains. We are not the conclave, he continued. We do not solve problems by destroying those who frighten us. We solve problems by being better, smarter, more creative, more patient. The council debated for 3 more days. In the end, they reached a decision that would shape the next century of human history. They would expand, but quietly. They would explore, but in secret. They would build alliances with other exiled species, others who had been cast out by the conclave for the crime of being different. And they would wait for the right moment to reveal themselves, not as conquerors, not as destroyers. As something the galaxy had never seen before. The first human stealth ship left Cinder in year 203. It carried a crew of 20 volunteers who knew they might never return. Its mission was simple: observe, learn, and make contact with anyone who might share humanity's dream of a different kind of future. The ship slipped past conclave sensors without a trace, moving through the void like a ghost. Behind it, 2 million humans continued their patient work, building the foundation for something that would change everything. The hidden renaissance was complete. The secret expansion had begun. And somewhere in the crystal halls of Axiom Prime, the Valori first speaker slept peacefully, confident that the human threat had been eliminated forever. He would not sleep so peacefully for much longer. The human ship drifted through the darkness between stars, its engines cold and silent. Captain Tomas Vasquez-Chan watched the distant lights of a conclave trading station through his viewport and felt his heart beat faster. This was the first time in over 200 years that a human had come this close to the civilization that had tried to erase them. His orders were clear: observe but do not engage. Learn but do not reveal. The 20 crew members aboard the Silent Dawn understood that their mission could take years, and that discovery would mean death. Not just for them, but potentially for everyone back on Cinder. They watched the trading station for 3 weeks. They recorded the ships that came and went, the species that used it, the patterns of commerce and communication. And what they learned shocked them. The Galactic Conclave was dying. It was not a sudden death, not a collapse that anyone could point to and name. It was slow and quiet, like a great tree rotting from the inside. The elder species had stopped growing. Their populations were declining. Their technology had not changed in thousands of years. They maintained their ancient systems and followed their ancient rules, but there was no life in them anymore. No spark of creativity or drive to improve. Tomas transmitted his findings back to Cinder through a quantum link that the Conclave could not detect. The Council received the report and began to form a new understanding of their enemy. The Conclave did not exile species because they were dangerous. They exiled species because they were alive. Any civilization that changed too quickly, that questioned too loudly, that refused to fit into the stagnant order of galactic society, was seen as a threat. The elder species had achieved a kind of immortality by stopping time, by freezing their cultures in place and crushing anything that might force them to evolve. Humanity had been exiled not for what they had done, but for what they might become. Over the next decades, human ships spread quietly through the galaxy. They mapped conclave territory, identified their patrol routes and sensor networks, and found the gaps where small vessels could slip through unnoticed. They built hidden bases in the spaces between stars, and systems too small or too remote for the conclave to bother monitoring. And they began to search for others like themselves. The Keth were the first. They were crystalline beings, their bodies grown from silicon and light rather than carbon and water. 3,000 years ago, they had developed a new form of mathematics that allowed them to predict certain quantum events with perfect accuracy. The Conclave had declared this knowledge dangerous and ordered it destroyed. When the Keth refused, they were exiled to an ice world at the edge of known space. Ambassador Lucia Chenakonko made contact with them in year 267. She was the great-granddaughter of the founders, a woman with her grandmother Elena's dark hair and her grandfather Marcus's determined eyes. She had trained her entire life for this moment. The Keth were suspicious at first. They had been alone for so long that they had almost forgotten other intelligent species existed. But Lucia was patient. She learned their language, studied their culture, and slowly earned their trust. "We are like you," she told their Council of Crystals. "Cast out, forgotten, left to die because we refused to stop growing." The Keth Elder, a being of pale blue light, studied her for a long moment. "And what do you want from us?" "Alliance," Lucia said simply. "Cooperation. A chance to build something better than what was taken from us." It took 5 years of negotiation, but the Keth eventually agreed. They shared their mathematics with humanity, and in return, humans shared their slip drive technology. Together, they began to search for other exiled species. They found the Marl, amphibious traders who had been stripped of their merchant fleets for the crime of economic innovation. They found the Singers, beings of pure sound who had been silenced because their songs could influence the emotions of other species. They found the Builders, a race of engineers who had been exiled for attempting to construct a device that could generate unlimited clean energy. Each exiled species had a different story, but the pattern was always the same. They had tried to grow. They had tried to create. And the Conclave had punished them for it. By year 300, the Coalition of the Erased had grown to include 15 species scattered across dozens of hidden worlds. They shared knowledge freely, combining their different strengths and perspectives. Keth mathematics improved human ship designs. Morrow trading expertise helped establish supply networks. Builder engineering techniques accelerated construction projects. Singer communication methods allowed instant coordination across vast distances. Meanwhile, on Cinder, the human population had grown to 300 million. The underground cities had expanded into vast complexes that housed factories, universities, hospitals, and research centers. The surface settlements remained primitive, the performance continuing for the watching drones. But below ground, a civilization was being born. The shipyards were hidden in the asteroid belt around Cinder's sun. Here, in the darkness between rocks, human engineers and their coalition allies built the reclamation fleet. Not a navy designed for conquest, but a force capable of defending what they had built and projecting power when the time came. Lucia, now the senior ambassador of the coalition, stood on the observation deck of the new flagship Ember and looked out at the growing fleet. Cruisers and carriers floated in formation, their hulls sleek and powerful, their weapon systems more advanced than anything the Conclave possessed. "We could destroy them," said Admiral Jiro Rahman, her military advisor. "We have the technology. We have the element of surprise. We could strike at Axiom Prime itself." Lucia shook her head. "We could win a battle, maybe even a war. But what would we become in the process? Another empire ruling through fear? Another conclave with different masters? Then what do we do?" Lucia turned to face him, her eyes bright with something that looked like hope. "We show them what they failed to understand. We demonstrate that there is another way. And we give them a choice they never gave anyone else." Admiral Rahman frowned. "You think they will listen?" "I think they will have to. Their civilization is dying. They know it even if they will not admit it. We are not offering them defeat. We are offering them survival." The preparations continued for another 50 years. The coalition expanded, the fleet grew, and humanity transformed from a scattered population of exiles into something unprecedented in galactic history, a civilization built on cooperation rather than domination, on creativity rather than control, on hope rather than fear. In year 350, Lucia Shenokonko received word from the Council of New Geneva. The time had come. The Conclave was weaker than ever, their fleets reduced, their populations dwindling, their will to fight fading with each passing century. She gathered her diplomatic team and boarded a single unarmed ship. The reclamation fleet remained hidden, ready to act if needed but not yet revealed. The coalition species sent their own representatives to join her. Together, they set course for Axiom Prime. The journey took 3 weeks. Lucia spent the time reviewing her notes, practicing her speeches, and thinking about her ancestors. Elena, who had smiled at the judges who condemned her species. Marcus, who had led the survivors through the darkest years. Amara and Yusuf, who had rebuilt knowledge from nothing. Kenji, who had chosen patience over revenge. She carried all of them with her. Their struggles, their hopes, their unbreakable belief that humanity deserved a place among the stars. As the crystal spires of Axiom Prime appeared on her view screen, Lucia took a deep breath and straightened her shoulders. "Open a channel," she said. "Tell them Ambassador Lucia Jin Okonkwo of the Coalition of the Erased requests an audience with the Council of 11. The communications officer hesitated. What if they refuse? Lucia smiled, and in that smile was 350 years of patience, suffering, and determination. They will not refuse. They are too curious. And too afraid. She was right. The crystal hall of Axiom Prime had not changed in 350 years. The same light from the same dying blue star poured through the same transparent walls. The same 11 thrones rose in the same half-circle at the chamber's center. Even the first speaker was the same, though his shell had grown darker with age, and his many eyes moved more slowly than before. He was 847 years old now. He had ruled the conclave for 4 centuries. He had watched younger species rise and fall like waves on a beach. He made thousands of decisions, some wise and some cruel, and he had never once regretted any of them. Until today, the being who stood before him was unlike anything in his memory. She was small by the standards of most spacefaring species, with brown skin and dark hair streaked with gray. She wore simple clothes that carried no symbols of rank or power. She did not bow or kneel or show any sign of submission. She smiled. That smile triggered something deep in the first speaker's ancient memory. He had seen that smile before, centuries ago, on the face of another human woman standing in this same spot. You, he breathed. Your species. You should not exist. And yet here I am, Lucia Chanoconquo replied. Her voice was calm and clear, echoing through the vast chamber just as her great-grandmother's voice had done so long ago. Here we are. Behind her stood representatives of 14 other species. The first speaker recognized some of them from old records, peoples his conclave had exiled and erased over the millennia. The crystalline Keth, the flowing Morrow. Others he did not know, species that had apparently survived and grown in the shadows beyond his reach. The other 10 council members shifted uneasily on their thrones. The mech weavers hummed with confused energy. The dreaming ones flickered between dimensions, their forms unstable with agitation. None of them understood what they were seeing. This is impossible, said the Valori second speaker. Our drones have monitored your planet for centuries. You have no technology, no ships, no capability for interstellar travel. Lucia's smile widened. Your drones saw exactly what we wanted them to see. Primitive settlements, simple tools, a dying species slowly fading away. It was all a performance, maintained for 350 years, while we built something real beneath the surface. She gestured, and holographic displays flickered to life throughout the chamber. The images showed Cinder not as the barren wasteland the conclave remembered, but as a thriving world. Forests grew in soil that human scientists had spent generations healing. Cities of glass and steel rose toward the orange sky. Orbital stations circled the planet, connected by ribbons of light to shipyards hidden among the asteroids. 300 million people, Lucia said. That is our population on Cinder alone. We have colonies on 17 other worlds in systems your maps do not even show. We have technology that exceeds yours in several key areas. We have allies across the galaxy, other species you cast out and forgot about. The first speaker felt something he had not experienced in centuries. Fear. Real, cold fear that seeped into his ancient bones. How? He demanded. We took everything from you. Your knowledge. Your tools. Your history. You took objects. Lucia replied. You took data. But you could not take what makes us human. Our curiosity. Our creativity. Our stubborn refusal to accept that anything is impossible. You tried to break us by giving us nothing, but nothing is where we do our best work. She stepped forward, and the first speaker noticed that she was not armed. None of the beings behind her carried weapons. They had walked into the heart of conclave power completely defenseless. Or perhaps, he realized with growing unease, they simply did not need weapons. "We could have come here with a fleet," Lucia said, as if reading his thoughts. "We have ships hidden throughout this system right now, more advanced than anything in your navy. We could have demanded justice for what you did to our ancestors. We could have burned your worlds the way you burned ours." She paused, letting the words sink in. "But we did not come here for revenge. We came here to offer you something you never offered anyone else." The first speaker's many eyes narrowed. "What? A choice?" The holographic displays shifted again. Now, they showed images from across the galaxy. Human ships delivering medical supplies to a conclave world struck by disease. Human engineers teaching new construction techniques to the stagnant mech weavers. Human doctors treating the genetic illnesses that had plagued the elder species for millennia. "Your civilization is dying," Lucia said. "You know this even if you refuse to admit it. Your populations decline. Your technology stagnates. Your young species lose faith in the old ways, but are forbidden from finding new ones. In another 1,000 years, the conclave will be nothing but empty halls and forgotten names." The council members exchanged glances. The truth of her words hung in the air like poison. "We are offering you an alternative," Lucia continued. "Not conquest. Not submission. Partnership. Join the coalition of the erased, not as rulers, but as equals. Share your knowledge with us, and we will share ours with you. Help us build something new, something better than what either of us had before." The first speaker rose slowly from his throne. His ancient body creaked with the effort, but his voice was still strong. "You ask us to abandon everything we have built. Our laws, our traditions, our way of life. I ask you to stop dying." Lucia replied simply. "I ask you to choose growth over stagnation, change over extinction, the future over the past." She looked around the great hall at the 11 beings who had once held the power of life and death over her entire species. "You exiled us because you feared what we might become. You tried to erase us because our potential threatened your comfortable decay. But you failed. We survived. We grew. And now we stand before you, not as the frightened primitives you expected, but as something the galaxy has never seen before." She raised her chin, and her eyes blazed with 3 centuries of accumulated hope. "We are humanity. We do not break. We do not forget. And from the embers you left us, we have built a world you cannot imagine. Now the question is simple. Do you want to be part of what comes next, or do you want to be left behind?" The first speaker stared at her for a long moment. He thought about the 40,000 years of conclave history, the countless species they had guided and controlled and occasionally destroyed. He thought about the slow decline he had watched for centuries, the gradual fading of everything his people had built, and he thought about that smile. The same smile he had seen on Elena Vasquez's face all those years ago, when she had stood in this very spot and promised that humanity would return. He had dismissed it as empty defiance. He had been wrong. Slowly, painfully, the first speaker lowered himself to one knee. The other council members gasped. No conclave leader had ever knelt to anyone in 40,000 years. "We accept," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Teach us how to live again." The vote to dissolve the Galactic Conclave and join the coalition of the erased passed 17 hours later. It was not unanimous, but it was enough. The old order, the ancient system of stagnation and control, crumbled in a single day. Lucia Chanokanko stood on the steps of the Crystal Hall as the news spread across the galaxy. Ships from the coalition emerged from hiding, their human crews finally able to show themselves after centuries of secrecy. On Cinder, 300 million people looked up at the orange sky and wept with joy. A young officer approached Lucia and handed her a communication device. Message from Cinder, Ambassador. They want to know what name we should give to this new era. Lucia thought for a moment. She thought about her ancestors, about all the generations who had suffered and struggled and refused to give up. She thought about Elena's smile and Marcus's determination. She thought about the long dark and the hidden renaissance and the patient years of shadow expansion. Then she smiled. That same smile that had terrified the first speaker, and gave her answer. Tell them to call it the Age of Embers, because that is where we came from, and that is what we will never forget. She looked up at the alien sky, at the strange stars that had once seemed so cold and distant. We started with nothing, she whispered to ancestors who could not hear her. And now the galaxy is ours. Not through conquest, not through destruction, through hope. Somewhere across the void on a small world orbiting a dim red sun, the descendants of 12 billion exiles celebrated the dawn of a new future. From the embers, humanity had risen, and this time they would never fall again.